What is going on, guys? Coach Phil here with Team P for P, and today we're going to go over another YouTube video going over the bench press setup, particularly the foot placement as well as the shin angles on the bench press. Now, myself personally, I have benched over 200 kilos, 200 kilos in competition to be exact, and I have also coached athletes at the world level who have a world-class bench press. So first and foremost, before we dive right into everything, I would say there's two types of setups when it comes over into the bench press, similarly to how we had it on the squat, where we want to look at the base in terms of our feet first before anything else. The same concept applies to the bench press. Now, these two types of setups going on into the bench press here, first, in my opinion, is, and this is the one that I perform as well, is planting your feet exactly where you want to bench to begin with, and then lying down on the bench. Now, vice versa, there's pros and cons to both, but the one where we have our feet up first on the bench and then come down, that is also another method a lot of lifters like to use as well. However, this type of method isn't allowed in the IPF umbrella, meaning if you compete in Powerlifting America or any other federation that's under the IPF umbrella, this is not allowed. And during the setup, it is deemed for a red light. But let's say you compete USAPL, right? Let's say you compete USAPL and you like setting up your feet on the bench press first and then having it come down. Or why lifters like to do this type of setup is it allows to have a low arch in the beginning where you ensure you have a low flat back, and then you bring that back higher. And what it allows them to do is create a higher arch and makes them really feel for that arch of that rib cage high into the bar. Now the cons, right? The cons I would say is every time you put up your feet on the bench press and you bring it down, it does create inconsistencies, whether that your feet be more forward or more back, or even let's say a staggered stance where if one foot is more forward than the other. This creates inconsistencies on the setup, which in turn creates inconsistencies from rep to rep or set to set. However, like I said, also pros and cons. If you train on different types of benches, let's say you go to crunch one day and then you go to a powerlifting gym on another day for SBD day, this might actually be optimal for you, right? Because different benches will require different setups or different placements, and this goes in hand with, like, let's say we like to plant our feet first. You may have to plant your feet a little bit forward or a little bit more backwards. We're going to go over that a little bit in terms of the shin angle here. So just keep that in mind. A little bit of pros and cons there, but more often than not, we're going to kind of just look at the baseline of everything and how we can have an optimized shin angle and foot placement so that we can bench efficiently. So what we're first going to look at is a neutral shin angle, or shin vertical or perpendicular to the floor here. This is actually an athlete of mine. This is a female, or I guess for some background, this is a female athlete here who is in the 67.5 to 75 kg weight class. And as she achieves her setup here, we can notice as she is benching, once she puts her glutes down, the shins are at a vertical shin angle. Now, typically, this is something that I like to steer newer athletes if they are unsure where their leg drive should be or where their foot placement should be. This is a good starting point. And then from here, you're able to bring your feet either forward or backward based on how you're feeling in terms of overall leg drive, or just feeling yourself in the quads and really being able to push through the floor. Now, a good cue that I would like to mention in terms of how we can think about leg drive is, instead of pushing the floor down, like kind of like a leg press, we kind of think about pushing the floor away from us. This same analogy can be used with scooting back in an office chair. So I'm in an office chair right now, I'm scooting back. That same leg drive of pushing the floor away from us, that is what we want to apply on the bench press here. Regardless of our foot placement or shin angle, this should be highly used. Let's say we did the other effect, right? Let's say we went to the opposite where we push straight into the floor. This can actually invite potential raising of the glutes or the hips. And in turn, if this obviously comes into competition and your glutes come off the pad, then it would be deemed a red light. All right, so now we're going to go over the positive shin angle approach here on the bench press, or in other words, having the feet behind our knees when we're bench pressing. In order to achieve that here, we actually have to have good hip mobility. If we do have limited hip mobility, or let's say tight hip flexors, a good warm-up that we can achieve is the couch stretch. So couch stretch meaning you can actually use the bench itself if you're benching and have one foot behind you propped up on the bench, and then have the other foot forward, and you can kind of just push your glutes forward there, and that will really open up the hips. So if we did have limited hip mobility, or let's say tight hip flexors, and we achieved this setup here, then this could allow, or this could invite heels raising up on the bench press. So in this case scenario, Kev here has great hip mobility, and he's able to achieve the bench press no problem with having the heels on the floor. And then, of course, the same concept applies in terms of what I mentioned previously of pushing the floor away from us and not pushing directly straight into the ground. So, of course, if we press directly straight into the ground, then this can invite the glutes coming up, but as we can see here, the glutes are steadily maintained on the bench. All right, and last but not least, going on to the last shin angle here, which is the negative shin angle. I'm actually using myself as an example. This is something that I achieved myself. So if we can take a look here, I'll go ahead and pause the video right here. The negative shin angle allows for the feet more forward. This is more so for lifters who have a taller stature. I can take myself as an example. I stand tall around 5'10 or 5'11, and having the feet behind me is just a little bit too uncomfortable for me. I feel really bunched up. I can't use as much leg drive. Let's say if I put my feet forward, and then vice versa, right? Let's say the lifter that I had in the beginning, she's a female lifter, lighter weight, a little bit of a shorter stature. Let's say compared to like a 200-pound male, as myself, having that feet behind her really allowed her to have dominant leg drive in terms of pushing the floor away for her and then staying in the quad. So we can go ahead and take a look at the setup here. And as you can see with my shin angle, even as I put my glutes down, the feet are still slightly more forward. And then I'm still able to grind through this lift while maintaining the glutes on the bench. And of course, just as I mentioned, same analogy applies, pushing the floor away from us. This can be difficult to do if the floor is slippery, hence why you see a lot of powerlifters or even in competition, why they have a carpet on the floor or they bring a carpet around so that they're able to utilize that leg drive of pushing the floor away from us. But yeah. Okay, so now we've made it to this point of the different shin angles, positive, the negative, and the neutral. Now it's the more applicable part, what applies for you, right? The viewer that is watching this video, or just like, let's say if you're trying to help out a friend, it kind of boils down to personal preference at the end of the day, right? So similar to squat, there's no wrong or right way to squat. Same thing with the bench, right? There's no wrong or right way to bench. I mean, in terms of the right way, just making sure that we are applying to or adhering to the rules, of course in competition with keeping the feet down, keeping the glutes on the bench, keeping the head up, the touch point of the head on the bench as well. So you may see different lifters in terms of the different outliers. Let's say like if there's a long-legged lifter who likes to keep their feet tucked, or let's say there's a shorter lifter who likes to put their shin angle forward, that's perfectly fine. But not everybody goes into like a bottleneck of like, okay, this is where you belong. But like I said, it all boils down to personal preference. So let's dive right into everything here. So positive shin angle, feet tucked. What are the pros? You have a slightly bigger arch and a shorter range of motion. Of course, in powerlifting, the goal is to move the most amount of weight possible, and having a shorter range of motion will adhere to that. I know in Powerlifting America, so let's say if it's troubling for you to hit elbow depth, you may benefit from a negative shin angle or a feet forward more approach. Of course, the range of motion will be longer, but it's easier to hit depth, right? You're gonna hit the 3 white lights. Great for locking in the upper back tightness and the shoulder blades down. So naturally, when we're pushing ourselves back towards the rack, our shoulders will become down and decompressed, and then you're able to push yourself into the back, kind of like how we talked about pushing the floor away from us. Easier to pull back into the rack of yourself that way there. It also opens the door to foot external rotation, combating the heels rising. So let's say we do achieve that tucked back positioning, and our lifter here, or let's say you as a lifter, still has the feet rising, but you really want to make the feet tucked really good because it resonates with us well. We can look to externally rotate our feet outwards to help with more of the surface area of the heels to touch the ground there. Very, very common, let's say on a commercial bench where the bench pad is low to the floor. So yeah, going on to the cons here, it requires more hip and ankle mobility. We kind of discussed a little bit about how we can combat that, such as the couch stretch. The butt is more likely to come off the bench. If we lose tension, it is very common for lifters who have a tucked foot positioning for the butt to come off the bench. And then cramping, right? Because there is a higher arch, more so in the lower back, right? The bench arch stems from our thoracic, but because we have our feet tucked back in our position, then in terms of the mid to low back, there's going to be a slightly more arch there. So I guess in a nutshell, ideally, most of our arch is going to come from our upper back, but of course, when we have the feet tucked back in that position, it will invite for mid to low back arching, which is perfectly fine, but just know like if we're weight cutting or anything like that in terms of a competition, cramping does invite itself. So negative shin angle or the feet forward approach here. Pros, easier to keep the butt down. If you or a lifter have, or a friend have trouble keeping your glutes down onto the pad, you may benefit from this negative shin angle here. More comfortable for long-legged lifters, as myself. Kind of mentioned, I'm a little bit of a taller lifter in terms of 5'10", 5'11". The longer legs in terms of just being able to push the feet forward and scooting back in the office chair resonates best with me. If I have trained in the past, let's say when I was at a commercial bench or the university gym where I need to bring it back to enable that leg drive, I would externally rotate my feet. But in terms of competition standpoint, when I'm in a combo rack, I feel much more powerful in terms of staying in the quads going into the negative shin angle here. Favorable for lifters who are less mobile. So let's say if you have limited ankle dorsiflexion, tight hips, things like that. No matter what you do in terms of just like your nature, right? Our body learns in the 24 hours a day to adapt. If we're constantly sitting at a desk all day and we work on Monday through Friday 9 to 5, don't really get our steps in, etc., etc. And it's very difficult. No matter the mobility aspect that we do, it still just doesn't click for us very well. Obviously, as we see here, the pros: negative shin angle, feet forward, and then less stress on the lower back. So let's say if we do have cramping, things like that, or let's say our thoracic isn't as mobile compared to like other lifters, you may benefit from this negative shin angle here. Some cons: it is a longer range of motion comparatively to the positive shin angle here, where your chest is much higher. And then it may feel slower off the chest due to the less stored tension. Like we mentioned here, you're able to put your shoulder blades down, push back towards into the rack, much easier with the feet tucked. Whereas when you have a forward shin angle here, you may have to look towards generating more force, but there are certain things or certain cues that we think about to achieve this here. But all in all, right, if you're a new lifter, go in the middle. Like we talked about, neutral shin angle, shins vertical to the floor, and then from there you're able to dictate, okay, experiment if you want to go front or back and see which one resonates best with you. So just a little recap here in terms of what we were discussing about, kind of just like recapping on everything in the beginning. So 2 types of foot placements, right? Feet up in terms of the setup on the bench press, not allowed in Powerlifting America or any federation under the IPF umbrella. However, in USAPL, this is perfectly viable here. More commonly than not, I will go ahead and steer my athletes just in case, even if they compete in USAPL, just to go with that foot placement of just planting your feet exactly where you want to first and then lying down on the bench. It just creates further predictability. It creates consistency across set to set. The only downside is, of course, if you go from different bench to different bench, then you're going to have to adjust accordingly. But this is something that as a lifter is almost like a skill to have, right? Like if we go to competition, sometimes the warm-up room bench will be different than the competition platform bench, and that's why it's good to be able to adapt to different benches, whereas the feet up on the bench press already attacks that point, but it does create inconsistencies set to set, whether the feet be a little bit more forward, feet be a little bit more back. But yeah, also recapping the 3 different shin angles, we went through negative, the positive, and the neutral in terms of vertical. Typically, more often than not, for newer lifters, we can start with the vertical, and then from there, we can see if we want to bring our feet forward or back, depending on our leg drive. And then our leg drive, of course, pushing the floor away from us, similarly to scooting back in an office chair. Kind of want to not think about pushing down into the floor. Then again, of course, every lifter is different. If that works for you, by all means, keep doing it. If you're able to have great activation in your quads and being able to get that bar off the chest and having that pushing back motion in terms of using our front delt, utilizing those quads, by all means, keep doing it. But for general consensus, for general lifters, that analogy of pushing the floor away from us will still allow for lifters to not only have their glutes on the pad, but stay in the quads as well. But yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them down below or contact the P4P page. But until then, see you in the next YouTube video.